taxation and revenue raising. Really just quickly, there are a couple of things that you might want to look at. There was this feasibility study. We can talk about that a little bit, or maybe some folks on the committee. There's been some mention of it in the paper. That would give you a rough outline of kind of what that initial look is as to what revenues and expenditures might look like. But I can tell you in the taxation and revenue raising discussion as municipalities go, I can really boil it down to you to sort of three legs of a stool. There's property tax, there's sales tax, and then everything else. And roughly with a little give and take, those three legs will be sort of equal in that equation. Now each one of those legs has a bunch of different things that drive those, so that will probably drive most of the discussion in that second lecture. Advantages and disadvantages of contracting services. In any city that would be considering incorporating, this is a huge discussion right off the bat, because there's only so much you can do. There's only so many humans that are going to volunteer to, be elected officials. You're not going to have hardly any staff at the very beginning, and frankly, you're going to want a lot of time if this incorporation goes forward. And by a lot of time, I mean years, to decide which of these services you might want to actually provide yourself as a municipality, or you might want to contract across the years, or the community might change its mind. I've seen cities, for example, change how they do policing between having their own department and contracting for that service multiple times in one city in the space of a couple of decades. So again, this is another one of those items that I think of any subject that we're talking about here, as residents, we should all be cognizant of and aware of. This is what that whole discussion is about. What do the people and the residents of the community want for themselves? So contracting services, I actually have somebody who's already committed to talk about that subject, a gentleman named Shane Pace. Currently he's the Chief Administrative Officer of Sandy City. He was the first, what was called contract administrator of Taylorsville when it incorporated some 20 odd years ago or whatever it's been now. And he's agreed to come and kind of speak to that. I think he'll be awesome in that subject. Land development process. I hesitated there, I want to hear if there's going to be any intakes of breath or gasping or anything. This is possibly the biggest topic any city talks about, whether they're newly incorporated, whether they've been around for a long time. This is a huge topic, and it's no different here, and I know that. I read the paper, I've watched development proposals that have come, some that have been fulfilled, some that have not. I think certainly in my own mind, development is not a dirty word in and of itself. Development, as I have seen it, and again, I'm just speaking from my own experience and opinion here, but it's inevitable in the sense that growth occurs, especially here in Utah, right? But there's all kinds of things that you can have from an effect as residents in the community to affect that process in a way that should be more unifying. I used that word as I was talking to Shanna and putting together some information, or at least letting everybody have their say and their thoughts on the subject heard, and not just that. I think a lot of times people think as a community, I'm going to go to this hearing and I'm going to say my say, but they've already decided they're going to do what they're going to do, and there's nothing I can do about it. I can guarantee you that's not true. Now that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is there are all kinds of people in the development process that have a say in that. Property owner, the local controlling government, state for sure does. State is heavily involved in how state statute affects development, all that sort of thing. So there's all kinds of people involved. I also have somebody that's committed to that topic, one of the foremost experts in the state. This is a lady named Nicole Cottle. She's had literally decades of working in this area. She's even done a little bit of work up here, I think, in the past. Transition plan. This is going to be an interesting one. I'm not sure who I'm going to have speak to this. I might maybe just either do it myself or ask one of the committee to do it, and maybe with some pointers I can give them. There's no set way to do this. I say that with a little bit of hedge. There obviously are state statutory requirements we have to do to get a city in place and operate a city. But a lot of that is really sort of the boring detail thing that you guys probably aren't going to be thinking about in terms of transition plan. For me, this is kind of the scariest piece. This is the thing you want to do the absolute best you can right off the bat. And I'm talking about things like legal representation, insurance, a good set of ordinances that won't be the final say on what you do as a community, but would be a good basis from which to start. That set of ordinances could include a process for adjusting or creating a general plan, which I know there's been a ton of work done in Ogden Valley. Personally, I've read a lot of it. I think it's a pretty good tool, pretty good effort. But that's the kind of thing you got to make sure is in place. Mechanism for financing in terms of receiving revenue and making expenditures out, making sure that's all accounted for, making sure that can be audited at the end of the year. All that kind of stuff has to be done up front, or at least put in place such that it will be able to be conducted. So that's what we'll talk about in that. Would be January 26th, is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that right, Nick?
Yeah.
Date, timeline? So yes, important step, but you'll have time to figure out how you want to run that. Also, that reminded me, there's a piece I forgot to bring up in the introduction and who I am. I think it's really important to let you all know that, and I've talked to the committee, I've talked to Mark about this at length. I myself, from, where do you fall in this whole thing, Wayne, I'm actually okay either way. If the area incorporates or if it does not. I've got enough experience. I know services are going to continue to be provided. Things have obviously been being provided and on a pretty good basis, and it's a beautiful place. This is not about, yes, we have to do this from my standpoint. This is about that famous Jeffersonian quote, right? The best government is the government that is closest to the people. Now that's where my bias does come a little bit. I'm always for, if it's feasible, I'm always for municipality or a city government because I do believe that's closer to the people and you'll have more representation in that realm in doing it that way. But that doesn't mean there aren't a ton of questions to be answered before the community gets to that place. And there are, quite frankly, honestly, there are things that could make that seem like it is just not the time or the place, or is just not going to be viable. And I also want to make sure I'm also making myself clear on that position. I don't think that's a financial question myself. Once again, from an experience standpoint, the finances are going to be a little higher or they're going to be a little lower than what the feasibility study says. That's not the big question to me. The big question really is this something that's going to help the community in terms of being able to, and I won't say control because you won't control, but influence at your own individual level and as neighborhoods and as an overall valley, influence the progress and the forward future of the community here. Whether it's named Snake Valley or Dirt Bike Valley, I'm kind of liking that one. Okay, so back to off that tangent and back here. External relations, federal ownership of property and municipal relationship. So federal ownership is kind of emphasized there, but really what I'm talking about, and I want to make sure we spend enough time on that lecture item, is there are a ton of different governmental and quasi-governmental entities that you're dealing with when you have a city, and I want to make sure we are able to talk and discuss those. Everything from how do we interact with the state legislature to maybe there's some insurance pool we want to buy liability insurance from. I mean, it literally is that far ranging. That's what I want to talk about. Contributing to the well-being of my community as a citizen. I'm not sure who we're going to have do this one. This is something as I used to sit as a city manager around the dais on a Tuesday night and listen to everybody come in and talk in the public comment section. I would think to myself, man, I wish I had a better bit of input for how people come in and what they know about, how they learn, how they contribute. It can be so good for the community and for the individuals, and it would be, I think it would behoove us as a community group to really think about that. How are we going to interact with that community entity? Which can be, again, all kinds of different ways, right? You could run for office, you could volunteer, you can be involved in a planning capacity, sort of like the Planning Commission, Ogden Valley Planning Commission has been, all kinds. Very good, and great segue into the last one, which is forms of government. You've got way more choice here than you might think you have. I'm not going to go, again, right now and here into what all of those are, but they're basically two general forms. A mayor-council form, where you have a mayor as the chief executive officer of the city who doesn't vote in a legislative capacity, except in certain circumstances, and then the elected council members who do the legislative arm. Or a council manager, or whatever the law just changed a little while ago, I forget what they call it, but basically a council manager form where the mayor and the council members are all in the legislative body, and then whoever they hire to run the day-to-day of the operations of the city, that person reports to them. You can do more or fewer council members, like Mark was talking about. You can write up your own ordinance in a fairly broad manner in which you assign what those duties are. It's a very important choice, and you will get the chance to talk about that. So those are the 8, of which we're in the first one now. Kind of obviously runs through September. I think I covered the points that I wanted to make, just to make sure you knew who I was, and then I'm just going to open right up to questions. So, ma'am.